Gray drizzle needles the keep stairs and turns each herald's practice note into steam. The rushes in the hall are tacky with old wine and last feast's confidences. Heralds test their lungs. Ushers test their shush. The dais rail gleams where someone remembered oil. The high table crouches like a ship at anchor. You're the newest hall warden on invite's watch. Stake bag at your hip. A coil of woolen hush cord in your fist. Tally slate and penknife under your arm. A bag of pounce that smells like crushed shell. A pot of red ochre. A tray of place tokens of wood and bone. And 3 sticks of sealing wax softening in your sleeve. If you like seeing how a feast behaves because paper said so, not because steel said so, walk with me. Tap subscribe and ring the bell. We'll string the lane, warm the wax, and make the seating map speak louder than a shout. Orders are plain because their consequences aren't. Peg a cord from dais rail to high table. Hang the board, seat before speak, where sleeves have to brush it to bend. Check the guest roll. Post the ban, no knives near parchment. A page mutters for courage, invitations are ribbons. The steward, who thinks in ledgers and long lines of boots, doesn't look up. They're maps, he says, and points his tally toward the king's brother, back from hunt, softer than a cat, whose men have a habit of appearing by the side door as if chance had a timetable. Make the lines mean it, he adds. You kneel and chalk the first stroke across the rushes. Peg taps. Tap tap, turn, tap. The hush cord snakes under your palm, meaning to be decoration if you don't make it a border. You give it a new story, straight from dais rail to high table corner, shallow arc where the bench lane kinks, seam to the door where appetite becomes opinion. Cord too near and pride cheats, men reach past it to turn the king's time into their own. Cord too far and courage slops into noise. The march to seats becomes a private war. Either way, the lane must be up before the hush horn peals call places. Rail. The sergeant palms a peg and rams it home with that tender force only people who have carried steel long enough to fear it possess. You plumb the dais rail, post to post, eye to chalk, until the bend reads like intention rather than collapse. You stamp footing where the trestles will take weight so nobody gets to call a stumble an insult. 2 chalk rings bloom, 1 at 2 paces from the rail for mouths that think volume equals rank, 1 tight to the dais for hands that need somewhere to stop. You hang the board where cloaks must brush it, seat before speak in red ochre thick enough to embarrass anyone pretending they can't see. Lower down, smaller law hand, seam talk, mint first, vinegar next. False start, vinegar coin. No knives near parchment. The page lifts a brow as if you've painted art. You slide a sprig of mint onto the rail. For dry mouths, you tell nobody and everyone. The guest roll opens like a threat that learned grammar. You pounce the first leaf, powder-eating grease so ink will bite where truth must stick. Then scratch down the names that will decide who leaves singing and who leaves sharpening. Captain Joran, Lady Stig, Miller of Eastcut, Lord Alcroft, brother of the king. You put a dot beside the last 2 because the steward put a dot in your ear earlier. You place the bone tokens along the tray and pull the first stick of wax from your sleeve. Heat makes it obedient. Drama recruits itself. A fan tips, peacock feathers spit into the seam. You catch the stick with 2 fingers and return it with a look that does the work a paragraph would ruin. A wax seal slumps under a heavy hand. You pinch it back into a crest before the steward can see. He sees anyway. His eye drops to your cord hand and stays there long enough to give your knuckles manners. You ease the arc at the rail a thumb where the rushes are slick with secrets. He doesn't nod. That is permission here. You chalk a quiet seam from door to board. Ochre dots 2 boot widths wide, where story must stop and grammar begin. Men read with their souls before their eyes. You knot the first peg with red thread, firm here. A line of knives clinks into the basket at the door 1 by 1, copper tally clicking with each surrender. The usher counts. You count him. Knife counts 17, missing 2. You make a note on the sanded slate and add a dot next to Alcroft. The steward hears the dot land without looking up. Call places. The hush horn breathes. Heralds try to soar. The cord makes them speak ground. The caller reads from the pounced roll, patient as weather. Captain Joran, high table, bench B. The captain stands where Chalk told him to and doesn't pretend he invented it. Lady Stig, bench A, dais end. Miller of Eastcut, trestle 1. A page begins to drift into the lane with a platter. Flat palm, hold. He freezes without dropping a bean. The king's brother arrives with hunters softened by a night and an argument. They angle toward the side door as if chance owed them rent. You are there with a staff and a mint leaf and your whole body pointing at the red thread on the peg. Step. He stands. He smiles like an apology written on silk. He reads the board. He does not cross. The provost arrives with a small book that wants to be a conscience and boots that prefer tile to rush. Inspection, he murmurs, rehearsed, eye on the cord as if the word makes lines true. Let him through and you stir gossip. They're cooking the order. Bar him and he leaves with the same sentence, salted to taste. Either way, the tide of faces won't wait. You lift a peg with the staff tip, threshold only, and hand him your tally slate, posted, read. Vinegar first, you say. He leans, finds dew and chalk and no theater, and becomes furniture without suing for a roll. Feathers spit again somewhere. A staff raps once, measure kept. The steward's clerk trundles in with a drawer of RSVP tokens. You cradle the sealed writs under canvas so they don't look like invitations to secrets. The king's brother picks up his place token and regards the bone as if it had teeth. It does. It's a map that keeps knives out of rooms and men in lanes. A sergeant palms a peg when a bench tries to shuffle itself closer to the dais. You redress the ring in the shadow as a lantern crawls closer, half files trade, a sleeve tug, a palm down, a quiet hold for the one who thinks proximity equals rank. The cord hums without being tugged. The tide of mouths keeps pretending it planned this. A page with linen cuffs too clean slides along the seam and tries wisdom on you. Invitations are ribbons. You point to the cord, to the board, to the basket of knives, to the red ochre under his toes. Maps, you say. Count. He frowns, he counts. He doesn't like what arithmetic does to certainty. Few people do. The wax behaves. Your stick leaves crests where crests belong. You place the tokens at the high table like a treaty with wood. The steward's eye finally leaves your cord hand and returns to the roll. That is the compliment you came for. Hidden lists wait under your bracers. Last winter's barred toasts. No drinking to healths that require enemies to reply. No jests about goatsons. No shouting short rain. Around a long table. You keep them folded and ready. The mint bag is lighter by 5. The vinegar dish has gained 3 coins. The board is busy with names that became places instead of problems. If this were your hall, if a page said invitations are ribbons and a brother smiled like a cat, how close would you string the hush cord at first light? Nearer for bite or wider for safety? Put your vote and where you're watching from below. I read them when the pounce dust washes from my fingers and the hush horn asks whether the cord belongs on the rushes again. You pace the quiet seam once more. Pegs sit like tame teeth. The cord holds without being pulled. The board says seat before speak in letters cuffs can't ignore. The basket of knives is heavier. The high table is calmer than it has a right to be. The horn will breathe call places again in a moment. You breathe. You let the map do the work. And somewhere inside the map, a soft-footed man who likes side doors learns how much weight a ribbon has when it is a cord. Dew lays a thin argument over the rushes and pretends the hall belongs to it. The hush cord is cold in your palm. Pegs knock a little tune your wrist knows by heart. Routine is the law that lets appetite stay civil. Before sun, peg the lanes. Tap tap, turn tap. Run the cord true. No swales for rank to pool in. No proud humps for stories to trip over. Pounce the guest list. Ground shell sifted across the first leaf so ink will bite where truth must stick. Chalk 2 rings by the dais rail, 1 at 2 paces for mouths that think volume is title, 1 tight to the rail for hands that need a place to stop. The dais has learned to accept chalk like a kind of courtesy. At the horn, caller reads, guest stands, hush. At the mark read, post the seating order, paste to sureties, who sits behind whom and whose boots stand between a grievance and the salt. Knife tally chalked, visible from the door. At lull, swap frayed hush straps for waxed. Saturday slack is dead. Dry strap first keeps hands from blaming weather for their tremble. And throw a laundry rope between pillars to air spare napery and cloaks. Cloaks hung high behave better at table. You draft the rota in neat chalk along the trestle end, hush staffs to seams 1 per, name runners to corners fetch next before anger learns its lines, reserves to the buttery to widen when ordered. They will pretend boredom now, and be grateful when boredom becomes space. Your job sits on your knuckles. Set the calling sequence. Tie colored threads on staves where a glance will do the work of a speech. White for petition seats, sober talkers and hungry debts. Blue for the oath bench, witnesses and their patience. Yellow for water pause, cups before counsel. Your ledger opens and learns 4 verbs again: pegged, heard, hushed, set by. The usher's stylus whispers them into wax as if numbers are talismans. Peg taps. Chord hum. Sand glass hisses as barley falls. The horn peels its low places. Breath before seating, the note that gives order a spine. The bell for serve waits like a polite gavel. The day pretends it is learned. It isn't. The caller begins. Lady Stig, bench A, near rail. Miller of Eastcut, trestle 1, near door. Captain Joran, bench B, high table left. The names fit the chalk. Chalk teaches names to behave. A lord with cuffs 2 clean steps reflexively toward the gap he prefers to invent. Flat palm, hold. He reads your hand, he reads the chord, he reads the board. He stands. Knives clink into baskets. You count aloud to your slate because counting out loud is how rooms learn to forgive. 11, 12, 13, missing 2. The steward hears the number rather than the worry. He nods at no one in particular, and 2 guards appear at the side door like punctuation. Suspense arrives in boots that prefer tile to rush. The provost ghosts along the seam with a small book that wants to be a conscience and a face that expects to own your chord by saying inspection. Let him through and you stir gossip. They're cooking the order. Bar him and he leaves with the same sentence salted to taste. Either way, the tide of faces won't wait. You draw a peg tip across the lane, threshold only, and hand him the fine slate instead. Posted. Read. Mint first, vinegar next. He leans, finds dew and chalk and no theater, and becomes furniture without suing for a role. Drama punches its time card. An ink pot tips across your fines book because someone colored their outrage too hard. You jam your wrist under the flood and save the line that counts. Seam talk equal to mint, then coin. False start equal to vinegar coin. Elbow across chord equal to seat lost. 3 strokes drown, your head writes them back while your hand blots and your mouth moves 2 benches with finger signs. Step, hold, down, so the chord stays an idea instead of a rope. 2 benches swap in a ripple of presumption. Habit outruns instruction. You redress the ring in shadow while a lantern crawls closer, half files trade, a sleeve tug, a palm down, a quiet hold for the one who thinks proximity equals rank. The chord hums without being tugged. The tide of faces keeps pretending it planned this. The hush staffs travel their lane with the calm of people who know what a rap buys. Not silence forever, only the next sentence's chance to be heard. Staff rap once when a laugh tries to become a rule. Staff rap twice when a toast sneaks in before the knives have finished clinking into the basket. Barred toasts lives under your bracer. The steward knows the list by heart, but lists don't move boots. Raps do. Name runners do the real magic. They are your map writ in legs. Lord Alcroft, Trestle 3, they say it at speaking volume, not trumpet. The chord does the trumpet's job by existing. Alcroft tries to angle his shoulder toward the rail. Your chalk ring under his feet says otherwise. He obeys the floor because people prefer to argue with faces rather than geometry, and you've left him none of the former. You pace to sureties because seating is promises shaped like wood. Behind the miller you set 2 boots in chalk, Ethel in person. Beside Joran you draw a barley mark, 2 sacks Levy dinner. Behind the king's brother, only a dot. You did not draw it. It drew itself when you lifted the chalk and your hand refused to lie. The steward notices the dot without turning his head. The market man at the gate works his canard harder. Captain's up first, father's last, and find. You let the room watch the map contradict his rhyme. Captain, bench B, third, Miller, trestle 1, Widow Sigrid, bench A. You say nothing. Demonstration without spectacle is the only sermon that sells. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman, wax attempting to make favor into law. Opened by order, the face lies. Near a cord for a certain seat, the whisper means. You put it in the drawer that kills paper gently, and tie a yellow thread round the nearest peg as a private joke your conscience approves. Clink of knives into baskets continues like mercy with a budget. 17, 18, 19. You chalk knives in 19, owed 2, and draw 2 little teeth beside the number so the board grins back at people who come looking for a fight. Dry strap first. You hear the steward tell a page who is struggling with a too soft loop. You rub wax into the leather until it behaves, and the strap remembers its purpose, to be moved, not heard. The cord is a mouth that only opens to say enough. You keep it honest. When the king's brothers, men, gather near the side door again, you stroll there with a place token and a mint leaf and lean the staff against the peg. Step, they step. Seat before speak, you tell the token, not the men, and slide it to trestle 4. The men watch the token, they obey the token. People forgive objects for insults, they never forgive each other. Blue threads mark the oath bench. You leave the staves in daylight, far enough from the dais that nobody can pretend arrangement is favoritism. The priest catches chalk sigils someone doodled on the rail and says, "No charms. Device, not charm." You note in your book, wipe the marks with rosemary water and hang the sprig on a nail to keep hands sweet. The air smells like restraint. A porter with an entrepreneurial soul whispers to a lord with an entrepreneurial mouth, extra heads, closer seats. Your look performs subtraction on his fingers. He learns to count to none. The second, secret slate in your coat, warms against your ribs. 3 lords who never take water pause when the yellow token travels. You erase one name because last night he took yellow without making you hunt him. The other 2 you carry into tomorrow like a thorn you intend to pluck when you've earned the grip. The bell taps. Serve. The steward reads the board like a man who trusts wood more than faces. Platters travel along seams, not diagonals. Voices travel after platters, not before them. The cord hums with attention, not appetite. The room holds. If the provost wanted inside the cord to quiet rumor, would you let him inside inspection or keep him threshold only? Put your vote and where you're watching from below. I count them when the pounce dust washes from my fingers and the hush cord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. By mid-feast, the routine has trained the hall. Pegs sit like tame teeth. The cord hums. The horn peals places. The bell taps serve. The board says seat before speak in letters cuffs cannot ignore. You scrawl your 4 verbs one last time, pegged, heard, hushed, set by, and look down the quiet seam you chalked at first light. Men carry their breath to the rail like it was a thing they were proud of not spilling. The brother studies the map and decides not to tug it. The feast decides to behave. Frost kisses the rail. Thaw wakes under the rushes. The ink in your horn sulks until your palm convinces it to be a liquid again. You warm a hush strap with wax until the leather stops complaining. Nick a clogged quill until it sighs into duty. Then put your heel into yesterday's seam. It lies politely, top firm, under soft. The hall intends to be both treacherous and reasonable. At the gate, a market man rents his throat to a canard. Captain's up first, father's last, and fined. He tries it 3 ways to see which buys him nods. The warden doesn't argue. He lays his palm on the hush cord as if quiet can be nailed down. Warden's peace at the cordon, he says. Then to you, orders that make your wrists honest. Demonstration without spectacle. Move the cord in the open. First places at the novice rail. Chalk the board, firm here, danger there. No knives near parchment where boots must see it. From the chapel door the sacrist adds what your shoulders already know. No clatter, mass. Your morning becomes a shuttle of small courtesies. Hush cord, dais, fines table, back and forth until the rushes decide they're being watched. You cradle a roll of sealed writs under canvas so they don't look like invitations to mischief. You peg where the frost stayed loyal. Ease where the thaw began to lie. Stamp the seam yourself so the first boot won't be surprised. You pull the cord out in a shallow arc and pin it straight while everyone looks. Geometry calms men faster than speeches. Then the choice that buys you critics either way. Post the cord shift first. Clean, visible arithmetic, and townsmen cry favoritism. See, captains get firm straw by the dais, fathers get slick rush by the door. Post the rotation list first, needier, fair, and the Chamberlain fumes. You're teaching people their place matters more than their form. Meanwhile, if a passerby spies blue thread oath staves near the dais, he'll shout cheat instead of rule. You choose the sequence you can defend without a paragraph. Path first, promise second. Cord moved in the open. Rotation posted immediately after. White tokens to near seam 2, blue to seam 3, yellow water pause last. Above it, where boots must see it to pass, you hang the bands, no knives near parchment. A clerk from the captain's table arrives with a rota torn down the spine by a thumb that wanted to be a palm. Paste, thread, the little iron he keeps under his cuff against 6 rules and a superstition. You hold a corner while he stitches the day back together. The iron thinks about performing. The sacrist glances over and breathes, no clatter, and the iron learns to whisper. The hush horn peels its low places. Peg taps quiet themselves. The warden keeps his hand on the rope but does not pull. He lends it patience, not weight. You chalk the public board by the door, firm here, danger there, and a hand that refuses drama. You hang a rosemary sprig on the rail to keep hands sweet, and mean it. A herald's trumpet nicks the rising talk into pieces too small to hire. The cellarer hisses move at a knot of shoulders that thought they were a conversation. A boy in the outer ring sags at the hush, breath getting ahead of courage. You steady him with your sleeve and hum the count at your wrist. Set feet, breathe, count. He nods at the chalk ring 2 paces back and forgives his own throat. You set pounce to the roll. Powder eats grease so ink can bite truth. The usher calls the first name at the novice rail. The petitioner steps to the ring and finally owns his boots. He opens his mouth. You lift your palm, hold, and point to the sand glass. He counts barley instead of goats. He survives his own sentence. Blue thread oath staves wait under canvas like temptation. You hang them last, in daylight, far enough from the dais that nobody can pretend arrangement is favoritism. A passerby opens his mouth for cheat. Rule, you say without moving your teeth, and the arithmetic supports you. A priest catches chalk sigils someone doodled on the rail and says, no charms. Device, not charm, you note in your book and wipe the marks with rosemary water. The apothecary shuffles by selling a sentence as he dusts sand from his sleeves. Peas and felt save bowels, mint saves mouths, a 7-count saves throat. He is right often enough to be tolerated. 2 benches try to trade places. Habit outruns instruction. You redress the ring in shadow while a lantern crawls closer, half files trade, a sleeve tug, a palm down, a quiet hold for the one who thinks proximity equals rank. The cord hums without being tugged. The tide of matters keeps pretending it planned this. You post sureties for good order where elbows must see them to sit. Boots drawn in chalk behind Old Mill, a barley sign behind Joran, a dot behind the brother that your hand drew and your mouth did not. The steward's staff raps once, measure kept. A fan somewhere shifts too loud, the staff raps again, the fan learns. By mid-morning, the proof looks like furniture. Cord where everyone saw you move it. Novice rail first. Blue staves hung last and honest. The board says, firm here, danger there, and nobody pretends not to read. The horn peals places, the bell taps serve when the platters travel. Men carry their breath to the rail like a thing they're proud of, not spilling. And the quiet myth that wanted to become a coup has to wait another day, because a line of chalk and a polite bell have made a world it cannot cross without showing itself. Torches gutter and make the hall look smaller than it did at noon. Gates bar with that elbow-deep clunk that ends the day whether anyone agrees. Word keeps its own hours and hires a chorus as it slips past the cord. Blind orders, favored chord. The square likes a rhyme when it thinks it was cheated of a nearer rail. Inside, the hall meets by candle to do what halls are for. Turn mockery into policy. The beetle taps your plank twice with the stick that believes it writes law. Copy fair, copy fast, flawless. You square the sheet. The quill behaves because your hand has learned not to consult your feelings. Public notice. Quiet passage to and from the cord. You write it where boots must read before mouths can improvise. Alms fines for broken pegs and barred toasts. Novice rail dressed first. On paper, orders to post days range, wind, and water pause at dawn. so rumor wakes up unemployed. You leave small doors the city needs to breathe. Save collapse, save fever, save order under strain. Sand hisses, the line goes matte. Before it dries, a flare blooms in the shed. Orange climbs faster than sense. You and 2 pages are already moving. Buckets find your hands as if they were born there. Wet wool hisses on embered planks. The queue at the outer bar forgets its lyrics long enough to watch flame learn manners. Rosemary and vinegar go back to their quieter work of smelling like discipline. Back at the plank, the beetle plants a knuckle in your margin. A small slip slides under your thumb with the practiced innocence of a profitable sin. Keep this quiet, the neat hand says. You tuck it under the ledger and rest your palm there until paper remembers filing is a kind of death. Omit it forever, your bone tells your nerve. Your nerve sits. A coin rings on your plank and refuses to shine. The miller's sister sets her only round where the ink can see it. Shoulders like broom handles, jaw that would rather bake bread than plead. 5 words different, she says. Leave the seed alone. Not loud. Truer than the jeer outside. You point your pen at the clause that teaches exceptions not to breed and write what the hall needed to learn. Seeds spared in frost and foul wind. Distraint only on clear, novice seed cases first. The beetle coughs at the line that will cost him a friend. You keep the curve of the S steady as if dignity could be written into vowels. Under the guest stair, a trap yawns. Men step down with private purses and come up with lighter pockets and better stories. Extra pegs, extra places. A porter has discovered he likes counting with his palm. You lift the hatch with a peg just enough to count and close it on a promise your shoulder can pay for in the morning. 2 more pegs gone than posted, 2 fewer tokens returned than sworn. The cellarer's hand lands on your shoulder with the weight of a nail. Make it wood, his thumb says. Boards can learn policy. You nod. You carry the fresh notice to the bar. Key rings stacked like teeth on the bailiff's belt chatter when the cartwheel squeals its old grievance, and then purrs after somebody shames it with grease. You nail the paper where hands can't pretend they weren't told. A drum under the board gives the words a spine. Suspense settles behind you like a gull. If the jeers aren't answered, the outer bar will try to be a song. If you answer wrong, your name slides onto the slate the clerk keeps oiled, to be silenced. Either way, the tide of cases won't wait. Tomorrow's dawn needs a script more than you need applause. Inside, tallies of peg immersements line up under your pencil. Recognizances with awkward crosses shiver into the docket. Some firm, some sideways, some by hands that prefer tools to quills. Rosemary and vinegar steam lift the room's patience a half-inch. The astrologer drifts in, declares the hour lucky if men stop talking, then shoves the lucky hour forward with his thumb when clouds thicken. Nobody pays him. He pretends the sky did. A patron's runner offers a folded chit with wax that confuses polish for law. Open by order, it claims, chin high at your margin. You lay it under the same palm that smothered the beetle's slip and let paper learn to die politely. Now the contested name. It warms your pocket like a small stove. A lord whose cousin stands too often beneath the arch with the chamberlain expects the close chord rhoda as if it were inheritance. He doesn't belong there. Another name does. The miller's sister whose coin bought seed a sunrise. The journeyman whose 7 count steadied 3 rails. Erase or obey. Unlock or relock. You lay the bad name on the plank over the rosemary tack and let friction pretend to be fate. You set him aside, you write the other in hand the city has learned to trust and punish. Your handwriting is where mercy lives. The city will teach you later what it costs to be recognized by your letters. The beetle coughs at exactly the wrong line. You keep copying. Quiet passage, alms finds, novice rail first. Range, wind, water pause at dawn. The wet wool keeps hissing in the shed. The sister's coin keeps ringing dull in your pocket. The astrologer keeps shoving luck along as clouds thicken. You keep counting. By the stair, the cellaret has a mouth for paid erasures. You walk past it and count aloud to your slate. Extra pegs, extra places. The cellarer's thumb presses your shoulder like a promise with hardware. Make it wood. You nod again. Morning will learn carpentry. You read the notice aloud because policy grows up when it hears itself. Quiet passage to and from the cord. Alms fines for broken pegs and barred toasts. Novice rail dressed first. Ranges, wind, and waterpaws at dawn. Drumroll under the posted sheet. Cartwheel squeal conceding to grease. Vinegar coins clinking in ladles. Key rings chattering like teeth. The square hears itself and decides to behave or be measured failing. If it were your plank, if a sister's coin rang dull where your sand still dried, if a patron's slip asked your margin to forget itself, if a name in your pocket insisted on warmth it hadn't earned, what would you write, omit, or obey? Put it in where you're watching from below. I count them when the pounce dust washes from my fingers and the hush chord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. You knot the notice where the drum can keep it company. You file the coin in the dish that is the only place tonight where money does what it's told. You file the chits in the drawer that kills them softly. You leave the contested name where rosemary can keep it from sticking to your hand again. You bank the brazier, torches gutter, gates bar. The hall smells like ink that decided to be honest and smoke that learned restraint. Outside, a city is learning quiet rules by cord and chalk instead of knives and shouting. That is the price of quiet on paper, and the tide will keep the bargain. Dawn unlatches the feast wing. Trumpets wet their lips. Drums remember yesterday's beat and hand it back to a town that hasn't earned music yet. The velvet voice climbs its crate by the buttery bar and nails the hour to the chord. His grace commends those who kept quiet order at the cord and board. Ranges are chalked because a bargain in ink said they must. Windows stand open not from virtue, but because a rule learned how to turn air into policy. The brazier glows the way a good tool glows, only because the order allowed it, not because anyone needs to admire it. The market man with the myth strides free as air, trying a new sentence on the light, and deciding to save it for a paying crowd. A midwife's lintel wears a yellow tag instead of red. Someone wrote the exception, and someone else obeyed it. Near the steps, a widow folds to the cobbles. Two strangers make a chair of their hands and lift her as if the town had rehearsed it, which it has. The velvet voice finishes the page. People accept being commended because it costs them nothing at this hour. Your errands carry edges. You are final witness and courier of consequences. First duplicate to the sheriff. Quiet passage to and from the cord. Alms fines for broken pegs and barred toasts. Novice rail dressed first. Day's range. Wind and waterpaws to be posted at dawn. He signs with a letter that doesn't blush and gives you the small look you've been earning all week. I saw. Second to the captain, the dry rota, the seam stitched by the clerk's little iron, the tally, matters heard, strays arrested. Arithmetic she prefers to adjectives. She nods and spares you both a speech. Third to the guild, hung where money pretends to learn manners, a snowfall of paper that settles dust without cleaning blood. Over yesterday's shut-ups for false oath, the levy clerk has pinned a muster sheet wide as appetite. Names bud at the lower edge where pride and debt keep their appointment. You finally understand what the brothers' quiet plan, caught in seeding and seals, bought. Not glamour, but obedience. Not luxury, but lanes that move, bellies steady, roofs that don't leak. And a harvest of men promised for later, because a straight cord is useful to more than dinners. The dry rota hangs over the board. Close cord, far cord, dry strap first, with the calm you wished for last week. Vinegar coins clink in ladles at the chest. Chests of fines grown into carts and purr after somebody shames the wheels with grease. A parchment marked misadventure for a slip at wet flags goes into the docket. A lie with a warm heart that keeps the morning cheap. The last rosemary bundle smolders to ash. The priest who warned off chalk charms watches it die and decides to respect devices publicly for a week. Then your coat remembers it has a drawer, the secret slate of spared turns, 3 men you did not bring to the rail because 7 breaths and posted bands were not enough to keep blood from learning old songs. The side list of moves you allowed against orders in the dark hour when thaw lied under frost and sense outranked command. Leak, burn, or file, you hold both like hot bread. Leak would be honest and brief. You would be too. It would splash in the yard like a good sin and die when nobody could afford to adopt it. Burn would be quick and teach you nothing but how to run colder. File is the story this corner survives by, proof where questions with hats can find it, nowhere near mouths with errands. You slide slate and list into the drawer under the ledger and listen for the click that promises a better hour will be allowed to ask you why. File. The steward finds you in the draft by the board. He offers a badge to mark more wisely, as if clarity were a party trick you refuse to perform. The guildmaster occupies the shade near your shoulder and offers sanctuary till the pest passes, the sort of dangerous kindness that fits under a cloak. The sheriff passes and gives you what he does best in your direction. Not nothing, not much. I saw. You answer all three with what you own. Keys, cord, brazier. Silence. Hear your wrists say. You keep your post. Public reading by the bar begins again because Velvet likes threes. The drum puts a spine under the notice. The captain's clerk flits in to finger the knot on the rota, decides it will hold, and vanishes before the market man can hire his breath. The sacrist rubs his palm along the chapel door and decides the wood can keep quiet without supervision. The cellarer hisses move at a shadow out of habit. If you had to choose, soft under a patron's livery or hard under sanctuary eaves, what keeps you whole, livery or sanctuary? Put it and where you're watching from below. I count them after the pounce dust leaves my fingers and the cord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. By noon, the extracts have turned into furniture. People lean on them and forget when paper had to prove itself. The levy clerk learns to keep his line moving without explaining his face. The market man tests a fresh myth and discovers grief has better ears than appetite. The board holds. The cord stays true. The line breathes without you needing to give it a mouth. Justice this week was airflow and cord budget. Mercy was policy, not indulgence. Survival was choreography of chalk, pegs, glass, seals, and staves, performed by people who don't need to be sung about to do it again. You were the hinge. You coil the slack. You pocket the keys. You bank the brazier. The horn will say places, the bell will say serve, and the cord will mean stay. The tide will keep its bargain if you keep yours.